Donna,
I can't stand up.
prolific author for Decoy Magazine, publisher of 2 books almost 20 years ago, 3 books 20 years ago. Top of the line fishing collectibles, top of the line hunting collectibles. Joe started putting this resume together. I could probably go and go and go and go, but conservation land management for Jim Cook, when Jim owned a bunch of property in South Dakota. What was the name of that place?
That's Fort Randall, but the big one was in Minnesota, Willow City. 1980.
Hunting guide, board member of the North American Decoy Collectors Association for 40 years. Jim Cook's personal decoy advisor. Also worked with advising decoys for Jim McCleary. Consultant with our company. Passionate decoy collector, friend, and most knowledgeable person in the world on decoys from the Illinois River area. That's Joe, and I'm going to turn him over in a few minutes. But first, I want to say a few things. Pheasant Run, the Bourne Auctions, the Oak Brook Hotel, Point Moulier, Pioneer Inn, Bud Ward, Richard Oliver Auctions, Toller Trader Decoy Magazine List, Hal Sorensen Decoy Collector's Guide, Ed D. Navarre, Hidalgo. These probably evoke some memories from the past, as they should, for those of you that recognize those names. And oral traditions are a form of shared history and a source of historical knowledge. And I got my first decoy in 1985 and started attending decoy shows in 1991. And I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to sit around late at night and listen to the stories of that our elders would share. And some of them shouldn't be shared, and some of them should be. But many important moments in decoy history are never captured in writing. And they are simply passed from person to person at the risk of disappearing. In the years of remembering TonellionHaid, it seemed like a perfect opportunity to share some of those seldom told stories, and yet important stories, that occurred mostly in this situation between a couple of people, TonellionHaid and Joe Tanelli. Joe, so we're going to go through a few of these, and then this is meant to be interactive. One of my favorites is a competitive story about TonellionHaid. It has to do with the Shord's goose. You cool starting with that one?
Why not? Well, I think we should tell him how I met him.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, this goes back a long way, 55 years. I met him at the Aurora Decoy Show. That was the 4th one. Alan showed up with his 2 buddies. They used to be called the Three Amigos, Dwyer and Tom Winslow. Bob Dwyer and Tom Winslow, they went all over hell. And Randy Root and I were there, and we had just bought, I think, half a dozen mid-range canvas backs. And Haid come up and introduced himself, and he said, "How much are those?" I said, $100 each. And he says, "I'll take one." I says, "Good." And a little while later, he come back, he said, "I got $50 more. Could I give it to you and take 2 on consignment, and I promise I'll pay you?" Now, you couldn't sell decoys in 1968, 69, 70. I could find decoys, but there was no auctions, there was no internet, there was none of this. So I said, "Sure." And he said, "Do you hunt?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I like to hunt." Long story short, 55 years later, he hunted with me 500 times. Saskatchewan, Minnesota, Illinois, Mexico, all over. And I sold him at least 500 decoys. I'd find some decoys, pick up the phone, Alan, I got this, I got that. This is when he was living in Ohio. He'd jump in that car, here he comes, drive all the way, go hunting with me 2 or 3 days, sleep on the couch with my Labrador, and he'd buy the decoys and go back, and this went on and on and on. Now, John says, I know more about Illinois River decoys than anybody else. That's the truth, hands down. Haid knew more about decoys than anyone. I don't care where they come from. He was the most knowledgeable, aggressive collector I have ever known. If he seen something good, and he knew there was a chance to buy it, it was like a beagle on the trail of a rabbit. He was going to get the job done. Originally, he didn't have a hell of a lot of money. He told the story not being able to come up with $100 for a buck. That's true. And he was a great friend, a real student, and I sure to hell miss him. So, where are we going to start?
I like the Shorts Goose story.
Ah, the Shorts Goose. All right, there's that Shorts Goose. That showed up at Richard Oliver's auction, what, 80-something?
Early. Yeah.
Jim was there, and that goose was there, and Haid was there with Goldberger, and they were over there. That's all they were talking about, that goose. And Russ made it known he was going to buy the goose.
And these guys are business partners.
Yeah, they just were starting out. And Russ made it known he was going to buy that goose. And we're sitting there at that same auction, I think there were the Crolls. Is that where you buy your Kroll, Jim? The Kroll Goldeneye at? Richard Oliver's.
Yeah.
All right. So we're sitting there, and this goose is going to be coming up. About 3 lots before the goose comes up, Haid gets up and I said, where the hell is he going? He's going to the bathroom, Russ said. I said, okay. Well, the goose shows up. Where did it go for? 30, 40 grand?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, Russ went. No, and everybody applauded that and nothing. A couple minutes later, here comes Haid. He sits down. I'm on one side, Russ is over there, and Russ says, who in the hell bought that goose, Alan? Alan said, I did, Russ. He went in the back room and called on the telephone. And that's how it was. If he wanted it, he wanted it. Where are we now, Mr. Dieter?
I don't know, what about the Elliston black duck?
Oh, that was one of my bigger mistakes. That was a major league mistake. I think 84.
Yeah, born auction.
Jim and I and Donna and Diane, we flew up to Maine, and Julie and Gary were having their first auction, the Congdon collection. And I walked in the door, and I seen Haid standing over there, and he kind of smiled, and he shook his head. I'm walking around, and boom, there's that goddamn duck. They had no idea what it was. No one in that room knew what it was besides Haid and I. It started out 100, 200, 300, 400, 500. When it got to 15,000, I gave somebody bad advice and told him to stop. And Haid didn't stop, and he got it for one bid more. That's the story of that black duck.
Oversized and the only one known.
Correct. It's a great, great piece. And looking back again, who knows? But when he paid the $15,000, that was a lot. Jim Julie was falling asleep at the auction podium because they were selling decoys for $25, $35, and when this sold, he jumped up.
stay on Illinois River.
Okay.
You pick.
The coot. There's only two known. Joe French had one that he got from Bob Weeks, who got it from a family who had the Ellison house found in the attic. And Joe French was like me and like Jim Cook, and he sold his to Jim Cook. Anyway, a few years later, Heidelka found this one, and he traded it or sold it to Eddie D. Navarre. Well, probably very few people knew about Ed D. Navarre, but he had a great eye, a great collection, had the best, found all the Bachs, Quillens, Masons, Schmitz. He had the coot. He had a fault. He believed he could find oil in the middle of Lake St. Clair on islands with a stick. You're laughing. He believed it. And he spent lots of money doing it. And he started needing money, and he called me up. He said, I want to sell my Ellison coop for $300 or $400. I called Alan, and Alan bought it. So that's where the coop come from. That Walker pintail is the best Walker pintail decoy that there is. In my opinion, might be one of the best, if not the best, Illinois River decoy that there is. There's two like that. They were made for a member of the Princeton Game and Fish Club by the name of Merle Brown. He had share number 28. He was secretary treasurer of that club for 35 years. When he died, his wife sold the boat, motor, those two decoys, pintails, and a dozen mallards to a guy by the name of Tad Vance. That's how they become known as the Vance rig, but they really were made for Merle Brown. And so French got two of them for Merle Brown, sold one to Jim McCleary, sold one to George Thompson, true, an antique dealer he had as a shelf. And French would give this woman decoys to sell, and all the collectors would think they were buying them from her because French didn't want to tell anybody he was selling decoys. So George Thompson had it, and I knew Thompson had it. In the meantime, I had already sold Haid a Skinner rig pintail, and he found out about that one, and he put his sights on it, and he ended up with it. That's the story on that one.
And that's the decoy he's holding when he published his Decoys of the Mississippi
Yep.
Flyway book in 1981.
Yep. That's a fabulous decoy. The Jolly Rig Mallard, I bought that from old man Jolly when he started selling them for $250 a piece. And everybody's gonna say, oh. He had 2 dozen. Flat bottom, dozen, round bottom, dozen, 250 a piece. Across the street, there was a guy by the name of Watson Lawton, had a dozen and a half round bottoms. Not quite as good, but good. He was only gonna get 150, 200 a piece. I bought that decoy and I sold it to a guy by the name of Bill Carr. Early collector with a lot of money from Winnetka, Illinois. In about 1987 or 88, he decided to sell his decoys, and he had Alan broker them, and that's one of the decoys that Alan got for doing the deal. The second decoy Alan got for doing the deal is that goose. I originally seen those geese in 67, Donna? 68. And I heard about Scheinheider, and I went
was
down there and
pregnant, I
knocked
know.
at the door, and Mr. Scheinheider, you got some decoys for sale? Yep. I said, could I look at them? I said, yeah. And we went out in the back, and I went in that garage. There was a whole friggin' dozen. They were upside down. Kid, 2 on the floor upside down. I said, what do you want for those? He said, lots of money. I said, yeah. It's $100 each or $1,000 for the dozen. Well, Now, what was I, 20 then, 19?
20. I was
No,
pregnant in the car
anyway.
with 2 kids.
She's in the car holding one baby, had another one in the oven. I'm making $42 a week. I'm looking at these decoys. How in the hell? I love decoys then. I said, I'll take 3. And I wrote a check, $300. I come out and put them in there. Donna said, what'd those cost? I said, $300. She said, we got $28 in the checking account. Now it's Friday. I figured, it's Friday. I can sell them 150 each. I'll get one for free, and I'm home free by Monday morning. I called around. I'm getting ahead of myself. I was not the first guy to see those. Joe French looked at them. Sorensen looked at them. Ralph Left looked at them. No one bought them. It's hard to imagine that $100,000 goose, no one wanted it for $100. So I called up Carr. He bought one, $150. I called Mackey. He said, send me one. So I sent Mackey one. Sold the other one. I figured I'll go back and get a couple more. Mackey calls me up and says, I don't like the goose, I'm sending it back. It's not worth $100. He sent the goddamn goose back, lest he lost the foot. He said, it's in the box. I ripped the box apart, it's not there. So I go back down to Scheinheimer's. He had another foot. By then, somehow, I'm talking to Adele Ernest. I told her about them, how great they were. She said, can you get me some? And I said, yeah, and one story about another. She bought 3 more. That's the story of that goose, $100. Sold it for $150. At the time, it was a good deal. It was a good deal at the time.
That's a great story. I love the story of how many people in here know the story of the Shang Wheelers? Now, like this is.
You do, Cook, you own them.
This is a fabulous story.
So, I tell you, Haid's like a beagle on the thing. All these years he's living in Ohio, coming to me, hunting with me in South Dakota, Illinois, going back decoys. He moves to Connecticut. And he's stirring the pot in Connecticut because he's aggressive, he's paying money, he knows more than most people. Well, one of the biggest collectors out there was Donald O'Brien. And Donald was in Connecticut and very influential and everything. Well, I'm sitting at home one night, Haid calls me up and says, hey, Tanelli, I got a deal. We got to get a hold of Cook. You won't believe this. I said, what? He said, the Audubon Collect Society is going to sell all those Shang Wheelers. I says, no. He said, yes. They want sealed bids. They don't want them to go to the auction. They want them to go to a collector.
How many decoys?
I don't know. Was there 70, Jim, with the shorebirds?
Yeah.
Roughly 70 with the shorebirds. He said, they wanted hush hush. I said, what the? He said, they're going to do it next week. This was like Tuesday. They're going to be the following Tuesday. I said, what's it going to take to get them? He says, I don't know. So he sent me the list. Jim and I talked it over. I think we decided on $265,000. How much?
Yeah.
268. So hey, we dropped this big line of baloney for corporate people at Audubon, and he presents it at their meeting, how this astute collector from Minnesota and blah, 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 and $268,000, and lo and behold, the only other bidder was a collector from Connecticut at 150 grand, and we buy him. Now, I jump in an airplane, fly out there, and I hired an ex-policeman to fly out there. We rent a car, we rent a trailer, we get the decoys. Alan met us up there, come out. Alan got a sleeping Shang Wheeler black duck for doing the deal. He took that. We loaded everything up, take off. We go over to Connecticut River about, I don't know, 10:30, 11:30, the bridge collapsed and people got killed and everything. So that's that story. Now it gets better. Maybe Mr. Cook don't like to hear this part. It was such a great deal. Everybody went nuts. All the collectors and everybody was going crazy. There was a guy by the name of Jackson Parker who used to write for Maine Antique Digest and everything. He called us, they called Haid a carpetbagger and me a thief from the Midwest and blah, 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 the jewel treasures of Connecticut going to Minnesota, on and on and on. And they were kind of right, because that deal was a deal. That was one of Mr. Cook's best deals of ever collecting decoys, because he got a lot of great decoys for free out of that. Questions?
What year was that?
The Audubon? 87. Yeah. We sold, they had I don't know, 25 shorebirds, 12 pair.
Yeah,
They were mounted.
diorama sets.
I didn't even get out of Connecticut. I sold them to Bud Ward for 25 grand. And we sold Jim McCleary some. And Jim's got, I don't know, how many you got left? 30, 40?
No, 30.
30? Gray swans, black ducks, mallards. And Alan bought a number of them. And of course sold them. But we would have never found them without Alan.
And this canvasback was in that group.
No. Originally it was. You want to hear the story?
Yeah.
All right. Shang Wheeler dies, 48, 49. And they didn't know what to do with the damn decoys. So Remington Arms donated $1,000 to the family of the state, and they were going to go and get the decoys. There was a guy by the name of Jack Mitchell, worked for him, and another guy by the name of Big Bill Johnson, who was a professional trap shooter. They go over in a pickup truck, pick up the decoys at Wheeler's home. And they're both duck hunters. So they're throwing them in, and they're going back up to give them to Audubon. And they're driving, and they get talking, and they said, boy, we like a couple of those. And Mitchell said, they don't know what they are. Well, this, Bill Johnson says, yeah. Jack Mitchell took that decoy and a preening golden eye. Bill Johnson was a hunter from Wisconsin, from Scandia, Wisconsin. Famous outdoorsman hunter. He took a cork black duck and a cork bluebill because he wanted to make cork decoys. That decoy was originally done, but it never made it to the museum. And that's one of the better ones out of the bunch.
Hey Joe,
Yes.
is there any story about those billies?
Yeah, there's a good story on them. I got a call from Jim. He says, you got to go down to Louisiana, to New Orleans. I says, why? He said, Doc Hardy. Anybody knew Hardy in here?
Robin Orr, yeah.
Judy, yeah. He was dying. He had a great sense of humor. And he says, Hardy wants to sell his shorebird collection. Well, Doc Hardy had a fabulous shorebird collection. So I get an airplane and go down. I had never met him. I met him. We went out. He went down to New Orleans. And Doc Hardy liked to drink, liked everything. And he was dying. He said, what the hell, I'm dying. I'm going to have some fun. But anyway, Jim bought those dillies, a few more dillies, Verity curlew, couple Mason curlews, that Mason curlew's in the auction, and a number of shorebirds. And after a few years, Jim got tired of shorebirds, and He said, I want to sell those shorebirds.
Jim was going broke.
Okay, you said it. He called me up, he says, I need 200 grand in 24 hours. I said, all right. So I called up Goldberger and Haid, and I think they bought a dozen, 10? How many shorebirds? 10 or a dozen? Yeah. That's where they come from. Alan stepped to the plate and bought them. Of course, Alan had first pick and Goldberg got second pick. That's the story of those shorebirds.
And before we open up to some other maybe Canadian stories or whatever, this is not a Joe and Alan story, but this is a little bit more on the ward goose. Bobby Richardson was in our office. You all have not been to our office in St. Michael's, Maryland. Please come sometime. We've got a 6,000 square foot building there, a gallery. It's wonderful to visit. There are people coming in all the time. And Bobby Richardson is one that blesses us with his presence fairly regularly. Bobby Richardson wrote the book on Chesapeake decoys and the men who made them, and was a dealer for a long time. You'll find decoys that say Richardson collection stamped on the underside. And he is colorful. He could have made a living as a comedian. But here's Bobby telling the story of the ward goose. I hope.
An executive for Colts Bank Company who owned the Bishop's Head Gun Club. They were given to him, and he in turn gave them to his son, and I in turn found out the boy had decoys. So I said, can I look at them? And he said, yeah. And when I looked at them, there they were, 3 ward geese and a couple of Madison Mitchell. He thought they were all ward brothers. Those Madison Mitchell for Madison Mitchell. But the 3 geese, I'm like, come on, look at you ever tell him. He said, yes, I'll tell them. What do you want for them? He said, I don't know would you give me $100 a piece for them? I said, no, but I'll give you 2. And so he left, I left 3 of them, of which when I exhibited one of the first years of the Eastern Waterfowl Festival, I exhibited, and Alan Haid and his wife looked at it, loved it, and said, will you sell it? And I said, yes, I would. And they wanted to know how much he offered. I said, 12 or 1,300, and I said, no, but I will take 24. I think the final price was probably 22 or 3. And he loved it, I loved it, and so both of us were happy. The other one was sold to Joe Tanelli by phone, and he just said he wanted one like Alan, so there were several but not quite as good as Alan's. And how did the bird get in the book? The bird got in the book when I sold it. He come back and give me the money, and I said, I had the book there. I said, let me show you something. I was going to get Alan Haid to sign it, but I was too busy trying to sell it after the sale.